New York Jets did what they do every offseason, and that's they win it in the fans' eyes. And hopefully this year that means they could actually translate it to some wins come the fall. I'm a huge Jets fan myself, and it's always hard to see what happens every season after we go into the off seasons. And from a Jets fan's perspective, it always seems like we have a pretty good off season. It's a big joke on Jets Twitter that the Jets win every offseason. And, as soon as the season ended last year, people were like, well, it's time for the Jets to win their Super Bowl the offseason. But I feel like there's a lot of excitement around the Jets, just as much excitement as there was last year, because we really didn't get to see Aaron Rodgers take control of this team like we were hoping for. And last offseason, I don't think you're going to reach the same level of excitement that happened. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers gets traded to the Jets right before the draft, even though he'd basically said he wanted to play for the Jets about a month earlier, and that the trade was being worked out and stuff like that. So we were expecting it happen right before the draft. Then he is officially a Jet right before the draft happens. Then we go into rookie minicamp, and the season just seemed to get started right away. And then there was all the rumors about Hard Knocks. The Jets don't want to do it, but they're being forced to do it. Or is it happening? Then Hard Knocks comes around, and the hype just becomes absolutely insane for the Jets. The Jets players look like they're having a great time with it. The media is fully tuned into the New York Jets. Everything's about the Jets and Aaron Rodgers and making his New York Jets debut and going to MetLife Stadium. I was there for an energy that I have never felt before inside of a stadium. It was absolutely insane and honestly indescribable. And then it was just over 4 offensive plays into the game, and the season was just completely lost. And obviously, as a fan, you're going to trick yourself. Maybe Zach Wilson developed enough in the few short months, and he's going to be able to at least make us or take us to the playoffs. Obviously, that didn't happen. We knew deep down it wasn't going to happen. But then it allowed the Jets to kind of take a step back. I think it helped Aaron Rodgers take a step back because a lot of the moves that the Jets made last offseason were to get Rodgers guys. And I think at the end of the 2023-2024 NFL season, it was really apparent that the Jets roster, while it has some really good players, they were missing key pieces in some pretty vital spots: wide receiver, offensive line. Honestly, just really those 2 spots, and the Jets needed to address them. And, Randall Cobb, Allen Lazard, those weren't going to be the guys that are going to save the Jets, obviously. The Jets knew they had a bunch of work cut out for them. And Joe Douglas really went out and did his thing. I think the Jets had a really, really good offseason, a really strong offseason. They signed Tyron Smith, who I did not think was going to be a New York Jet. The rumors obviously happened because the Jets are in need of a tackle. He's the best tackle on the market. I didn't really think he was going to leave Dallas, even though now he says that they didn't even offer him a contract, which seems insane to me. But even if he left Dallas, I didn't see him being a Jet. It kind of blew my mind when that finally broke. They traded for Morgan Moses. They signed John Simpson from the Ravens. Elijah Vera Tucker is going to be coming back on the offensive line. Joe Tippmann had a really good rookie year. Overall, they really built up their offensive line. Wide receiver, they get a really solid number 2 wide receiver to line up on the other side from Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams. Again, another player that wasn't available when the Jets started free agency. And it was kind of, well, the Jets haven't done anything. They're going to need to make a splash in the draft. And then Mike Williams, the whole Taylor ham, egg and cheese saga happens, and it took over social media, and he signs with the Jets. It's another huge upgrade. We're not relying on Allen Lazard for another year to be the number 2. I think he's a really good depth piece. Whether he stays a Jet, I'm not sure. But a really, really good receiving move that the Jets have done, something I feel like Joe Douglas really hasn't put a focus on outside of Garrett Wilson. And then we go into the draft, and I can't lie, I was a little disappointed with the Olu Fashanu pick. And that's not because I think he's a bad player. It's actually quite the opposite. I think he's a really good player. And anybody you're taking at number 11, you're going to think is a player that's going to help you for a long time, and that's exactly what he is. I was just really hoping that Odunze was going to slip past the Bears. I knew it was highly rumored and kind of expected that he wasn't going to that he was going to end up in Chicago. I was just, maybe they have Keenan Allen, they have DJ Moore, they have Cole Kmet, they have a good receiving core. Maybe they'll take the best defensive player available, since Atlanta right before them had selected a quarterback, which nobody saw coming. So the Bears had, any defensive player on the board that they wanted, they could have taken. So I was really, really hoping. Obviously, that didn't happen. And I think Fashanu is one of the best. I've said his name twice now, and both times differently. I'm pretty sure it's Fashanu. It's just when you look at it, it looks like Fashanu, so I apologize. But I think he was one of the best players available on the board at that time. I'm stoked for the pick, a huge pickup for the Jets' future. It's just at that point they had already signed Tyron Smith, traded for Morgan Moses, like we spoke about earlier. But overall, it was just like, it stinks to add a depth piece, but if you're going to get a depth piece, he's one of the best ones you could possibly have. He's going to be your long-term left tackle as a franchise. Hopefully it works out, unlike their last left tackle who they drafted in the first round. You're hoping this one works out. He had a ton of college success. He looked really, really promising. He's going to have a year to sit, hopefully, barring any injuries. It was just more if you wanted that playmaker to slip to the Jets and they'd have a really good receiving core. At number 10, which ended up becoming number 11 after the Vikings trade. But ultimately, he's a great player. I'm excited for that. Then you go with Malachi Corley, who everyone is now calling the Yak King, or he was already called the Yak King, but, baby Deebo Samuel, he looks really, really good from the highlights. I'm not going to pretend that I watched his tape or anything. From highlights, he looks like he's going to be a huge boost, a really, really solid option to line up, alongside Mike Williams, the new addition, and then Garrett Wilson. I'm really excited to see him. That's something I feel like I haven't seen a lot of people talk about. Garrett Wilson has basically been the team's best receiver, and Breece Hall, but Breece Hall's a running back, but he's also an incredible receiving back. But Garrett Wilson lining up on the outside has basically been the only Jets threat receiving-wise, so teams kind of just been able to focus on him. I'm excited to see the Jets add 2 more playmakers alongside him, just so that he can maybe even, break out a few games, because he's already a fantastic player and he has to break double coverage, triple coverage. They're always focusing on him. I'm excited to see him having really good players next to him, how that allows him to develop. He's going into year 3. I think it's going to be a huge breakout year. The Jets overall are in a really good position. Roster wise, they have basically, in my opinion, one of the best rosters in the league, if not the best roster. I mean, every position you look at, they basically have a great player, and then they have depth to it. Defense, we know from last year, is absolutely incredible, and they lost Bryce Huff. They replaced him with Hassan Reddick. You lose Jordan Whitehead. The safety position is probably the biggest question mark on the team. However, Jordan Whitehead and Tony Adams, there was question marks going into last year about the safety position, and they still played great. The Jets overall have a scheme where they kind of rely on the defensive line to not force the secondary to play for too long, and the defensive line forces the offense to have to make decisions really quickly. So it's a really good scheme that Saleh has, and the defense plays it well, so I'm not worried about them. Everything that the Jets had questions going into next year is offense, and the biggest question is health, which we can't say we know is they're going to be healthy. We also can't say that we know they're going to get injured. It's kind of a thing. Every team, you just kind of hope to be healthy by the end of the season. Overall, I think the Jets had a really, really good offseason, one of the best in all of the NFL. They have one of the best rosters in all of the NFL. And I'm really excited to see if that could finally propel them to have a winning offseason like always, and then a winning football season.